Hello friends, welcome to another thrilling ghost story. Tonight we delve into the chilling tale of Hollow Hill Asylum, a place where the echoes of the past refuse to remain silent. Gather around as we uncover the dark secrets and haunted whispers that have plagued this abandoned institution for decades. Prepare yourselves for a journey into the unknown, where every shadow hides a secret and every sound tells a story. So dim the lights, hold your breath, and join me as we explore the eerie world of the Phantom of Hollow Hill. The small town of Fairview had always seemed picturesque, with its quaint houses, friendly residents, and serene landscapes. However, at the edge of town, shrouded in dense woods, lay Hollow Hill, a place that locals avoided and whispered about. The abandoned Hollow Hill Asylum loomed atop the hill, its crumbling walls and broken windows telling stories of a dark and disturbing past. For years, the townspeople had spun tales of ghostly apparitions, eerie screams, and flickering lights emanating from the asylum. No one dared to venture near it after sunset, and those who did were never quite the same when they returned. Protagonist introduction. Meet Sarah Mitchell, a journalist with a fascination for the paranormal. She had made a name for herself by investigating and debunking ghost stories. When Sarah heard about the Hollow Hill Asylum, she knew she had to explore it. Determined to uncover the truth behind the legends, she set out for Fairview, armed with her camera, recorder, and an unwavering determination. Upon arriving in Fairview, Sarah encountered the town's elderly librarian, Mrs. Thompson, who reluctantly shared the asylum's history. The Hollow Hill Asylum had once been a place of hope, where Dr. Jonathan Crane treated mentally ill patients with progressive methods. However, a series of mysterious deaths and Dr. Crane's sudden disappearance turned the asylum into a place of fear and suspicion. It had been abandoned ever since. One evening, as Sarah approached the hill, a thick fog rolled in, shrouding the path in an eerie, otherworldly glow. The trees seemed to close in around her, their branches creaking like the whispers of the long-dead patients. Undeterred, Sarah pressed on, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and excitement. Inside the asylum, the air was thick with decay and the faint smell of antiseptic. Graffiti-covered walls bore witness to years of neglect and vandalism. As Sarah wandered through the darkened corridors, she felt an oppressive weight, as if the very building were alive and aware of her presence. Sarah set up her equipment in the old treatment room, where Dr. Crane had conducted his controversial experiments. The room was filled with rusting medical instruments and decaying furniture. As she recorded her thoughts, a sudden chill swept over her and the temperature dropped sharply. The first sign of paranormal activity came as a faint whispering, almost imperceptible but growing louder with each passing second. Sarah's EMF meter spiked, and her camera captured orbs of light dancing around the room. Her heart raced as she realized she was not alone. While reviewing the footage later that night, Sarah saw a shadowy figure standing in the corner of the room. It was a tall man in a white coat, his face obscured by darkness. The figure seemed to watch her with an intensity that sent shivers down her spine. Determined to uncover more, Sarah decided to spend the night in the asylum. As midnight approached, the atmosphere in the asylum grew heavier. The whispers became clearer, forming words that echoed in Sarah's mind. "Help us, find him," they pleaded. She followed the voices to the basement where the most disturbed patients had been kept. The basement was a labyrinth of narrow hallways and small padded cells. In one of the cells, she found an old diary belonging to a nurse named Emily. The diary detailed the horrors she had witnessed, the cruel experiments, and the tormented spirits of the patients who had died there. It also revealed that Dr. Crane had been driven mad by his own experiments, believing he could communicate with the dead. Suddenly, Sarah felt a cold hand on her shoulder. She turned to see the ghostly figure of Emily, her eyes filled with sorrow and desperation. "You must find him," Emily whispered, her voice a haunting echo. Guided by Emily's spirit, Sarah navigated the basement until she found a hidden door. Behind it was a secret room where Dr. Crane had conducted his final experiment. The room was filled with arcane symbols and occult artifacts. In the center lay Dr. Crane's journal, detailing his descent into madness and his belief that he had opened a portal to the afterlife. As Sarah read the journal, the air grew thick with a malevolent presence. The room shook, and a dark figure emerged from the shadows. Dr. Crane, his eyes burning with an unholy light. He reached out towards Sarah, his voice a guttural growl. "You should not have come here." Summoning all her courage, Sarah remembered the rituals described in Emily's diary. She quickly formed a circle of salt and recited an incantation to banish the spirit. Dr. Crane's ghost howled in rage as the circle began to glow, the symbols burning brightly. With a final scream, his figure dissipated into the ether. The asylum fell silent, the oppressive weight lifting. Sarah knew she had freed the tormented spirits of the patients and laid Dr. Crane's ghost to rest. Exhausted, she made her way out of the asylum as dawn broke. the first rays of sunlight piercing through the fog. Back in Fairview, Sarah shared her findings with Mrs. Thompson, who was both shocked and relieved. The town finally had closure on the dark chapter of the Hollow Hill Asylum. Sarah's story became a sensation, bringing her both acclaim and a deeper understanding of the paranormal. As she left Fairview, Sarah couldn't help but glance back at Hollow Hill. The asylum stood silent and still, its secrets now revealed. But deep down, she knew that there were many more haunted places and restless spirits waiting for her. Her journey into the unknown was just beginning. Sarah spent the next few days interviewing the townspeople of Fairview. Each person she spoke to had their own eerie tale about Hollow Hill Asylum. One of the most compelling stories came from an old man named Henry, who claimed to have worked as an orderly at the asylum during its final days. Henry described Dr. Crane as a brilliant but increasingly erratic man, obsessed with his experiments on the human mind and the supernatural. He recalled nights filled with strange lights and unearthly sounds emanating from the asylum, as well as patients who spoke of shadowy figures and whispered secrets. Determined to get a first-hand account of the asylum's last days, Sarah convinced Henry to accompany her to the asylum. Together, they navigated the overgrown path and entered the dilapidated building. Henry led her to the second floor, where Dr. Crane's office still stood, untouched by time. In the office, Sarah found a treasure trove of documents and recordings. She discovered tapes of Dr. Crane's sessions with patients, where he pushed the boundaries of ethical treatment in his quest to understand the afterlife. The recordings were filled with the anguished cries of patients and the relentless, eerie voice of Dr. Crane urging them to go beyond. That night, Sarah decided to conduct a seance in Dr. Crane's office, hoping to communicate with the spirits directly. Henry, although reluctant, agreed to stay with her. As they began the seance, the temperature dropped, and the room filled with a palpable sense of dread. Sarah called out to the spirits, asking for guidance. The candles flickered and then blew out, plunging the room into darkness. Suddenly, the old tape recorder on Dr. Crane's desk sprang to life, playing one of his final sessions. The voice of a patient, terrified and pleading, filled the room, followed by Dr. Crane's cold, methodical instructions. Then a shadowy figure materialized in the corner. Dr. Crane himself, his eyes glowing with an unholy light. He stared at Sarah, his face twisted in a malevolent grin. "You've come to join us," he hissed, advancing toward her. Henry, overcome with fear, fled the room, leaving Sarah alone with the ghost. Summoning her courage, she held up Dr. Crane's journal and began to recite the banishment ritual she had found. The ghost howled in fury, the air around him crackling with dark energy. The room shook violently, and Sarah struggled to keep her voice steady. The ritual circle on the floor began to glow, and the symbols burned with a bright light. Dr. Crane's figure writhed and twisted, trying to break free. With a final ear-piercing scream, his form disintegrated into a mist, and the room fell silent. Sarah found Henry hiding outside the asylum, shaken but relieved that the ordeal was over. They returned to the town, where Sarah shared her recordings and findings with the local historical society. The townspeople, initially skeptical, were captivated by the evidence she presented. The story of Hollow Hill Asylum and Dr. Crane's tragic downfall was published, bringing closure to the residents of Fairview. The asylum, once a place of fear and superstition, became a historical landmark, a reminder of the past and a warning of the dangers of unchecked ambition. Sarah's work on Hollow Hill Asylum earned her a reputation as one of the foremost paranormal investigators. She continued to explore haunted locations, documenting her findings and helping restless spirits find peace. Each new case brought its own challenges and terrors, but Sarah faced them with the knowledge and confidence she had gained from Hollow Hill. Years later, as she reflected on her journey, Sarah often thought of the spirits she had encountered and the stories they had shared. She knew that the world was full of mysteries waiting to be uncovered, and she was ready to face them all. The echoes of the past were always there, whispering their secrets to those brave enough to listen.